Hi there. In this video, we're going to quickly talk about blood and what is inside blood, the different blood cells that they have, what they look like. So starting with blood, there's three different components. We have plasma, which is like the liquid in blood. In the plasma, you find water, mostly water, and then also some proteins, hormones, platelets, nutrients, and wastes. And it's about 55% of our blood. That's the liquid portion. And then the two things that make up our solid portion is white blood cells, also known as leukocytes, a very small amount of that. These are the ones that are going to help with our immune response, which helps us fight off infection. And we also have something called the erythrocytes, which are red blood cells, and they are biconcave discs. You can see them right here that carry oxygen and a little bit of carbon dioxide. So those are our solid portions in our blood. So when we look at these things, and you look at a test tube, we saw a picture like this, but we're going to draw it out. So when you send your blood to the lab, originally the sample looks like it's pure red, but what they do is they put it in a machine called a centrifuge, and it spins it really, really, really fast. All the heavy stuff falls to the bottom, and all the light stuff goes to the top. So the liquid portion stays at the top, the heavy stuff goes to the bottom. So at the bottom, we have about 44% would be our red blood cells, and about a little less than 1% would be our white blood cells, and then the top portion would be our plasma, which is about 55%. So that is what we have to draw there, is just our little proportions of blood. The blood also is super important in our body, so it has a couple of different things like transporting materials. It also makes sure we have constant or constant-ish concentrations of stuff, and make sure that we stay at a constant temperature, which is 37 degrees Celsius. So some of the things that it transports is nutrients, gases like carbon dioxide and oxygen, and waste it will send to the kidneys so that we can get rid of it. It also carries hormones, which tell our body what to do. So talking first of all about the red blood cells, remember it's about 44% of our total blood volume. So this is a normal blood sample. You can see there's lots of red blood cells. They're kind of light red colored cells. They're for oxygen, and they do not have a nucleus in them, so that we have more room in them to carry our oxygen. And they also have this thing called hemoglobin in it. So hemoglobin is what the oxygen bonds to, and it also has iron in it. So sometimes people have the condition called anemia sometimes they have anemia if they have too little red blood cells, or maybe not enough hemoglobin in the red blood cells. So this is a picture of someone who has anemia in their blood. So basically you can see that there's way less red blood cells, and even the ones that are there are really, really hollow on the inside. That's basically because hemoglobin in our normal red blood cells will pick up the dye. So if they have less hemoglobin in their red blood cells, it won't kind of stain as well underneath the microscope. So that would be anemia. Basically, anemia is just you're getting way less oxygen to your cells. So there's a couple different types. This would be iron deficient anemia. There's also something called sickle cell anemia, which has different shaped blood cells than what we normally have. So we'll talk about that later in chapter 8. Our white blood cells there's three different types. So granulocytes are ones that engulf and destroy, but they have to stay in the blood. Monocytes are ones that can leave the blood, and they're also in charge of engulfing and destroying. And then lymphocytes are the ones that make antibodies. So we're going to have to learn what those things look like, but I'll show you guys that in a little bit. So platelets are really, really tiny. They're just fragments of cells. So you'll see that they're a lot smaller than a red blood cell or a white blood cell. And they have no nucleus because they're not actually a cell. They're just a piece of a cell. And they are what help us blood clot. So we'll learn about blood clotting a little bit later in chapter 8. So all of our different blood cells, this is kind of the key part to what we're learning in this video. We have to know what each one looks like. So red blood cells look like biconcave discs. Platelets are just little tiny fragments, so they almost look like little pieces of popcorn, but they're tiny in comparison to a red blood cell. White blood cells, remember there's like a whole bunch of different types. So I split them into kind of their functions. So create antibodies versus eat and destroy. So a lymphocyte has quite a large nucleus in comparison to its entire cell size. So you should be able to recognize the one with the big nucleus is a lymphocyte. Eat and destroy cells, monocytes are the ones that can leave the bloodstream. Monocytes or macrophages are really common. They're quite large in comparison to other white blood cells, and they usually kind of have a really weird shaped nucleus, kind of with lots of lumps and bumps on it. But it's quite a bit bigger than the lymphocytes or the other granulocytes that we're going to show you. And they're usually just kind of weird shaped nucleus. Granulocytes are ones that always have granules in the cell, so little like dots. So the neutrophils are the ones that are most common. They have more than one nuclei, so 2 to 3 or 4 nuclei. Basophils are ones that have really, really dark purple granules, so you'll see like really, really dark purple spots. And eosinophils are ones that are bright orange or red granules. So the basophils and the eosinophils are not very common. You might not ever see them underneath a slide, a microscope slide, but they are there sometimes. The most common ones are the neutrophils, the monocytes, and the lymphocytes. So if you can draw these pictures and write down the information, this is kind of the key piece to what you need to know in this video. So hopefully it makes sense. Have a good day. Talk to you guys later.